use my Okay, right, before we start, I would like to do a sound check. Okay, please you make use of the chat box to let me know that all of you can hear me clearly. Can you all hear me clearly? Please use the chat box to let me know that you can hear me clearly. So do let me know that you can hear me clearly. Okay, other than hearing me clearly, do your friends have to be ETG student? No, anyone can attend this masterclass. They don't have to be ETG students. You can just give them the link, but we can only take up to 99 participants. And your video cameras need to be on to attend the session. Okay, right, so if everybody can hear me, can you all see my PowerPoint slides? So I'm doing a sound and visual check. Can you all see my PowerPoint slides? You can make use of the chat box. Hey, don't be too worried about the microphone. At the end of the session, I'm going to give some time for Q&A. That is where I will allow you to turn your microphones on and you can ask questions. Okay, for now, all your microphones are by default muted, so only your web cameras should be on, your microphones should be off. You should be able to see my screen, okay, and you should be able to see me. Can you see me? Can you see me clearly? Okay, so let's go ahead and start our class now. Okay. Right, so just a very short introduction. I'm not going to take too long. It's been a pretty sobering day. I'm not too sure if you heard of what has been announced today. Have you heard of what has been announced today? Right, schools are going to be closed from Wednesday onwards, and it's going to be closed for a full month. Right, so this is, I think, really the perfect time to be holding on to this. Okay, not really perfect time. I'm not actually in quite the mood to hold this masterclass after hearing the news, but okay, life has to go on, so we are going to continue the lesson. Right, I suppose you have had like a full day of lessons at home already, so I hope everything has been well for you and not exceedingly boring. Okay, right, so let's go ahead and start today's class. Okay, for those of you who are not my students, I'm going to do a very short introduction. I am Mr. Eugene To. I have 2 master's degree and a bachelor's degree. 2 of my degrees are in economics. I am an alumni of both SMU and NUS. I have written a series of guidebook and textbooks, and if we end early later, I will show you some of these guidebooks and textbooks. Okay. Okay, for some reason the internet connection seems to be a little bit laggy on my iPad. Okay, right, so I'm gonna switch the screen to my other screen, so just give me a minute. So my other screen is a little bit laggy. I'm not gonna use my iPad. I'm gonna use my I'm gonna use my desktop. I think that should make it a little bit less laggy. So just give me a minute. Okay, I'm gonna stop this. Open. Okay, this should be a little bit better. Okay, right, so I think it should be a little bit less laggy now. Okay, let me just do one final check. Okay, are you able to see my screen clearly? Is it okay? Are the slides clear? Okay, you can nod your heads, of course I can see you anyway. Okay, right, so what's our ETG program? Basically, right now all our lessons are actually online. It has been online the last couple of years. For the last couple of years, it isn't the case that we only move our lessons online in the last 1-2 weeks. Actually, all the last 2 years, a lot of our students have been live streaming. Okay, some of our students actually, many weeks they actually live stream from home in the last 2 years. Okay, I'm gonna cut the introduction and just move straight to the masterclass because I don't want to waste your time. I think your time is precious and I think you had a really long day already, so I'm just going to go straight to the rational decision making masterclass and do less of the hard selling. Okay, now so I'm going to talk to you about rational decision making framework. The problem with the rational decision making framework is that most schools actually do the teaching of the rational decision making framework only at just give me a minute. Yeah, so most schools only do the rational decision making framework right at the start. That means like after your scarcity, your opportunity cost, and before your demand and supply. I think rational decision making should actually be a topic that should have been covered after you finish covering everything. Okay, because it is actually one of the most topics that is tested at the A levels, and to answer rational decision making framework questions, you actually need to have an understanding of all the topics across micro and macro. Okay, later when I'm going through the questions with you, you will be able to see that a lot of these rational decision making framework questions cover a wide range of topics across things like budget, across things like demand and supply, across things like market failure. Okay, so that's why rational decision making framework questions are really pretty difficult to answer. And so this is what you are supposed to know, and if you actually think about it, right, today's announcement is actually very, very sobering, and we have, but if you, how many of you actually you can just nod your head if you actually spend time watching the ministerial statement just now? How many of you watched the ministerial statement just now? Were you all impressed at how they coordinated the statements, like how, you know, the different ministers made different speeches about the different aspects that need to be done? Were you all impressed? I don't know whether you all were impressed, but I felt I'm pretty impressed by the way that it was coordinated and done. It showed that a lot of thinking were done, a lot of steps were taken before we came to this critical juncture that we made this decision to do all of these things. A lot of planning needs to be done. So if you realize that, right, when we talk about rational decision making, the decision to reach today's close down of schools and close down of the workplaces is actually something that we are studying in economics. Like, if you think about it, okay, the government, right, when they make a decision, right, they need to consider the perspective of various stakeholders. Okay, various stakeholders like your workers, your producers, which are firms like myself, consumers like yourself. Okay, and they need to consider that, hey, you know, if we look at from a non-economics basis, right, everybody knows how to do a cost-benefit analysis. Like, should I eat like chicken rice today? How satisfied or how happy will I be if I ate chicken rice today? Then how much will it cost me? If this is the price, then this is how shook I will feel. Am I going to consume the chicken rice today? Now that's a very easy decision to make because your costs and your benefits, they are very, very straightforward. Okay, but if you think about like today's decision, right, to come down to what is close to a lockdown, it's a school closure and workplace closure, but that's as close as you can get to pretty much a lockdown already. So please stay at home. Don't go out and run and go and meet your friends. Okay, so be socially responsible. But you see, in decision making framework, right, it's not just about the cost and it's not just about the benefits. Like, for example, when you think about it, in today's decision, right, when they made the decision to shut schools, right, there were actually certain constraints that they had to consider, which is that if your family, right, work in essential services, okay, you guys are JC kids lah. I think you'll be quite safe at home on your own, right? You won't set the house on fire, right? Will you? Will any of you set the house on fire? Okay, no, right? So you're not gonna set the house on fire, right? So I think pretty much you're quite safe lah. But can you imagine primary school kids if they're not in school, right? And then their parents, imagine they are doctors, they are nurses, they are firefighters, they are paramedics. it's going to be quite cumbersome for them to actually arrange caretaking arrangements. So this is a constraint that the government has to take into consideration when they decide, whether to shut schools. And they have to consider the perspective of various parties. Like, for example, people will be concerned, if the workplace is shut down, by the time we go back to work, will my boss fire me? Okay, so those perspectives needs to be taken into consideration. And then today they also announced this thing. Do you realize something? They changed their stance. They said previously they said that schools are a very safe place, right? Right, they said that, right? And then they also previously said that you should only wear mask if you are sick, right? Okay, it's not that they are changing their stance because they were wrong. It's that new information has come in. And when new information has come in, you need to take into consideration this new information. Okay, you need to think, now I got this new information. What a lot of young kids, okay, not say a lot lah. Study says that actually young kids can die. Young kids can die, and young kids around the world have died from COVID-19. So they say, okay, as a precaution, let's better do this. And then with regards to the mask issue, they say that now it's a better idea for you to actually wear masks. Okay, even if you're not sick, because you might be an asymptomatic carrier. You know what is an asymptomatic carrier, right? Asymptomatic carrier means actually you can pass on the disease. You're sick, but you don't actually quite know you're sick, so you can pass on the disease. So it's better for people to wear masks. Now this is new information that has come to light. Okay, and then when you make this decision, you have to you see that got so many different ministers talking about different things. Why is that so? It's because when you make any decision, there are going to be intended consequences. Can anybody tell me what are the intended consequences of shutting down schools or not, and shutting down workplace or not? They want to prevent human to human interaction, right? That is the intended consequence, right? That's what they want to do. They want to reduce the amount of transmissions. Okay, but what are the unintended consequences? The unintended consequences is that it's going to significantly hit the economy. Right? It's going to be very, very badly impacting the economy, because now not just one or two businesses or one or two sectors are affected. Now every single sector, okay, say for your supermarket sector, say for your medical supply sector, say for your civil service, now every single sector is affected. Now, so that is your unintended consequences. So this rational decision making framework, it becomes actually super duper interesting, because we can use this to analyze the situation and make sense of the world around us right now, and help to come to an understanding, why is it that the government choose to do these things these certain ways? Okay, right, so we have currently 68 participants. I still have space for 31 more. So if you've got any friends who want to come in and you find so far the lesson has been quite interesting, you may want to WhatsApp them. I've got 31 more spaces. Okay, right. I'm continuing now, and I'm going to try to break down the framework, the decision making framework for you. Okay, so when we look at the decision making framework, we have to try to classify the things that are obvious. But we also have to take into consideration of the things that are not so obvious. The things that are obvious are things that are very intuitive to us. That means to say that when we're writing essays, or actually we're making decisions in our life, we will be very, very cognizant of these obvious things like, when I do this, what are the benefits to me? When I do this, what are the costs to me? When I do this, what was it that I intended to take place? Okay, but the not so obvious is actually a lot of people don't take into consideration information. There's this thing, this very common phrase around Singapore that they always say, Malaysian government always flip prata. Singapore government always flip prata. Flip prata means you said something and then you go back on your words. You reverse your words. Now, I can't say so much for Malaysia. I don't want to comment on Malaysian politics, because there's nothing much to comment. I think you can go and find out on your own what's up with Malaysian politics. For Singapore wise, when we change our policy stance, it may not be the case that we do not stick by the things that we were previously saying. We change our policy stance because new information has come into play. Okay, when new information has come into play, you need to recognize that this new information, should change your decision if the information varies a lot from the previous information you had. Okay, and the current information is that there is an increase in the spate of local transmissions that are unlinked. Okay, the new information now is that WHO is saying that people should be wearing masks. Okay, that the WHO is saying that previously they were saying the young doesn't seem to be very vulnerable. Now they're saying that the young can be vulnerable. So these are changes in positions that the government has to take into account of because of these new studies that have taken place, and they found out that these are new facts that we need to recognize. Okay, and in deciding to make a decision, you cannot just unilaterally make a decision like that. Like for example, when you shut down schools, there are constraints. Like you shut down tuition centers, okay, you also have constraints. Like now you see a lot of tuition centers, they are struggling now. They don't know what to do. They're moving their classes online. Do you hear this? My wife teaches primary school. My wife teaches primary school. So she got a lot of primary school kids. So she's a primary school tutor. She used to be a primary school school teacher. Then she's a primary school tutor now. Then she has a lot of kids that she's teaching now. You know what? They say gymnastic class is now done via Zoom. Can you believe it? How do you do gymnastic class via Zoom? Right. So of course there are some things that can Zoom lah. I think like this class I'm teaching you. I mean, if you ask me, do I prefer to teach you like in a full class setting? Of course, I prefer it in a full class setting. But also, there's one downside to teaching in a full class setting. I cannot accommodate 71 people. Now I have 71 people in this chat, which is perfect. Right, I think it's okay. But if you're talking about constraints, is there going to be a limitation to learning when you're doing through Zoom? I think so. Like for example, now actually, how many of you not really paying attention? Okay, so to your credit, most of you are paying attention, so okay lah. But how many of you actually not paying attention? I don't know. I can't tell. I can't possibly be scanning 71 faces all at the same time. Okay, right? Okay, so anyway, let's move on. Perspective means that you cannot ignore. You cannot only pay attention to one group of people and ignore the rest of the world. You cannot just pay attention to only one group of people and ignore the rest of the world. What am I saying here? So like when you do this school closure, you're gonna, just now the minister was talking about graduation ceremonies. You heard about that? If you were hearing the speech, do you hear about it? So they're saying that graduation must go on, but graduation ceremony is not essential. Walao, damn sad leh. Imagine you work your whole life for that stupid bloody graduation ceremony. Now the minister say, no graduation ceremony. Right, also must take into account emotional perspectives, right? Correct or not? So some of these things we have to pay attention to. We cannot just say, okay, we ignore. Okay, and then unintended consequences. Have you all thought about, with this COVID crisis, after this COVID crisis ends, what is really going to happen is that a lot of your favorite restaurants are not going to be there anymore. Do you realize that? That a lot of your favorite restaurants are not going to be there anymore. A lot of your retail outlets are not going to be there anymore. Right? A lot of your entertainment outlets, like, I don't know whether you've gone to any escape room. I haven't. I don't know what's the fun thing about it, but if you've been to any of them, but a lot of them are shutting down permanently for good. Right, it feels like, when this whole thing blows over, there will be a lot less entertainment options in Singapore, and that is something that's very concerning. Okay, so we must also take into consideration that Party A's decision affects Party B. Remember when Malaysia announced a lockdown? You remember that what happened that very day that Malaysian announced a lockdown? What happened to our supermarkets? It became super duper crowded, right? Because what are people worried about? They were worried about that. Your supply of food from Malaysia to Singapore is going to be significantly affected. And you realize that this is something that our government has paid attention to. When they said they were going to shut down workplaces, they said that anything that affects the global supply chain will go on. And I think that's pretty cool that we have taken in consideration of that. Okay, so this is the decision-making framework. It is not just about the obvious, it is also about the not so obvious. So you have to make sure that when you're writing all of these points, you take into consideration all of these things. All right. So we're gonna move on. Let's deal with 2 or 3 questions today. I think we should be able to do 3. Okay, I'm feeling up to it for 3 questions. Okay, so we're gonna look at how rational decision-making framework questions are going to be like in an actual examination. These are all actual examination questions. So I'm gonna let you try them. You might be a bit shocked with some of them. Try to calm yourself down. I think today has been a very shocking day. Okay, for you and for me. Right, so don't be too shocked about the difficulty levels. Okay, so let's deal with our first question today. This is a case study question from Hwa Chong 2018 prelims on DAMS, DAMS. Okay, Keith, please make sure you are doing crowd control for me. If anybody you cannot verify the identity, please kick them out of the room. So make sure you can see their faces and that they are actually students, not random strangers coming in to look at what we are doing. Okay, right, so we're going to look at this question from 2018 prelims, Hwa Chong prelims on DAMS. Okay, I'm not going to give you 10 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. If you were writing a case study response to this question, what will you write? Go ahead, go and try it now. 5 minutes, everyone, we have 5 minutes. What would you answer to a question like this in a case study? What do you think this question is even about? Go ahead. It's a super strange sight to see you all studying at home. Very, very strange sight. Okay, by the way, just some hints. If you think that this question is about public goods, fail already. No marks. So this question is not about public goods. Okay, right. So I think I've given you all some sufficient time to look at this question, discuss the factors that a government should take into consideration in whether to build a dam. So I hope you have had some good points to this question. Okay, right. So first, the first thing is to obviously deal with the obvious which is the monetary cost associated, right, with building a dam. Okay, but it's actually not so straightforward. It feels straightforward, but it's actually not so straightforward. We start first with the actual monetary value of the entire dam project. And when we talk about a dam project, we have to consider both how much does it cost to construct, but not just construction is just the immediate cost. You also have to consider the long-term maintenance cost, okay, which is over the lifetime of the dam. Okay, so if the dam, you're expecting it to serve you for 100, 200 years, you have to consider how much, okay, will it cost you to maintain this dam? Do you actually have the money to maintain this dam over the lifetime of the dam? Okay, then the next thing is that if we have to spend a sizable portion of our country's budget to build this dam, is this going to have a significant impact on our budget? Is our country's budget already stressed? Which for some countries it could be, and could it be possible that there are more meaningful projects to actually receive funding in place of this dam project? Like for example, if I don't build this dam, what can I do with this money? Can I provide medicine for the poor? Can I provide healthcare and education for the poor? Can I do some infrastructure improvements like building more roads? Okay, so the other thing is that when we are looking at the budget, we are actually paying attention to if your country already has a significant budget deficit. Okay, and if there's a significant budget deficit, usually there is a huge debt that they need to service the interest. Does this add to this budget deficit? Does it add to this debt? And does it add to the interest that you have to service? And then the last thing here is that yes, I've got to spend money building this dam, but can I recover part of the cost associated with building this dam by perhaps generating hydroelectricity and selling this hydroelectricity? If it could, then it could mitigate some of this cost associated with building this dam. Right, so these are your very obvious points. Okay, now next, risk of flooding. Okay, say for example, if you want to build a dam, sometimes the reason for building a dam is because you want to prevent flooding. Right, so you have to consider that if there is a high risk of flooding, what is actually the risk? Like how many percentage chance in any given year, and is this percentage chance high enough to consider that to fund this dam? The other thing is you got to consider things like population density. Why you want to consider population density is because flooding taking place in different places have differences in repercussions. If you flood a densely populated city, of course the economic damage is going to be huge. You flood a desert, there's going to be quite little economic repercussions. In fact, it might be quite good to flood a desert. So it depends on what is the population density be like. Okay, so what will be the value of these potential damages for you to take into consideration whether you want to fund this dam project. Next, you have got this environmental cost. Okay, what is this environmental cost? This environmental cost would be if you actually build this dam, are there negative externalities associated with building this dam? Okay, who does it affect, and how does it affect them? Because when we talk about negative externalities, we got to make sure that we look at it from the economics point of view. When we talk about negative externality, there must be a cost that's implicating a third party. So if it contributes to global warming, does it so significantly that it makes a difference? And would there be any way for the government to mitigate this environmental cost in any other ways? So if we were to come to a conclusion for this question, we must say that actually whether or not we should fund a dam in a specific country, in a specific area, it can differ from country to country, it can differ from area to area. And even though a dam is considered to be a public good, each individual dam project doesn't mean that it just is a public good means it's a go ahead. It doesn't mean that way. Okay, so like one good classical examples that I will bring in is that one of my favorite places to go with my family would be Marina Barrage. Actually, Marina Barrage serves as a dam, if you don't already know that the Marina Barrage serves as a dam. Right, there are some unintended consequences that are actually quite positive associated with Marina Barrage. Like for example, it allows for leisure activities. A lot of people go there for picnics. A lot of people go there for kite flying. This is something that we will not be doing the next one whole month. Okay, right, so these are the things that you can actually talk about, which are the intangibles. So this will actually influence our decision to actually proceed with a dam. Okay, so this is our first question. Alright, so this is Hwa Chong prelim question in the year 2018. Let's go and try out now another question from Temasek Junior College. Okay, we are going to try out this question, and this question is going to be about Malaysia, and it's also going to be about Texas. Okay, so let's have a look at this question on Malaysia and Texas. We are specifically looking at part B only. Please read the preamble. Okay, read the preamble already, then after that read part B. Then I want to give you 5 to 10 minutes to try out the answer for part B. Okay, we cannot look at political answers. We can only look at economic answers. So throw your political sentiments aside and treat it that the Malaysian government is actually rational and they are making a rational decision here. So what will be the factors that they will take into consideration of? Okay, 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 5 minutes. Take some time to read through that and try it out. What would you have written for these questions? By the way, the questions that I'm letting you all try out today, they're all questions that at this juncture in your life you are able to actually attempt already. You should have the content to actually deal with these questions already. Yeah, I thought the cute annotations will only happen in my wife's primary school Zoom sessions. Apparently the annotations happens in mine too. Okay, 1 more minute and then I'm going to go through the answers. Hopefully you'll get the right things to talk about. Okay, right. So let's try out. Okay, what do we need to actually write in an introduction to this essay question is that we need to consider that when the Malaysian government decides to actually implement these policies, okay, they will have to actually run through a cost-benefit analysis in terms of impacts on these four elements. Okay, four aspects, not elements: consumers, producers, government, as well as the economy. So we're gonna split the answer into four distinctive parts. Alright? So let's start first with the first distinctive part, which is what's the implications of these actions on the consumer. Okay, so when you impose tax, right, it will of course increase price. When consumers have to pay higher prices, they will actually reduce consumer welfare. But there are actually two different kinds of accommodations. If you read the question, there were two different kinds of accommodation. Let's go back and see what were the two different kinds of accommodation. It says here that $2.50 250 ringgit at non-rated accommodation to 20 ringgit at a 5-star accommodation. You can see that the Malaysian government has actually decided on two separate kind of pricing. Okay, right. He asks whether or not we should always split into consumer, producer, government, and economy. In this specific question, yes, but not always going to be the case. You remember the part that we say multiple perspectives? So you got to actually try to consider who are the different stakeholders in the specific question and to see what will be the impacts on these different stakeholders. In this specific case, consumer, producers, government, and the economy will be the different stakeholders. Alright? Now, so RM250 and RM20, okay, so there will be different kinds of implications, right? What will be the different kinds of implication? Now, first, your non-rated accommodation, it takes up a smaller proportion of a person's income, so demand is going to be more price inelastic. If demand is more price inelastic, okay, any tax that is passed on to the consumer will likely bear the bulk of the tax burden. Whereas on the other hand, for 5-star accommodation, because there are many substitutes available and it takes up a larger proportion of a person's income, demand for 5-star accommodation is going to be more price elastic. Okay, so producers will bear most of the tax burden instead. So this is actually a consideration that we bring in this tax incident concept. The tax incident concept, remember the general rule of thumb of tax incidents is that whoever is more price inelastic will actually bear more of tax burden. Okay, so since non-rated accommodation, the demand is price inelastic, consumers will likely bear the bulk of the tax burden. Whereas 5-star accommodation, demand is more price elastic, so producers will bear the bulk of the tax burden. So this is like an evaluation for us. Perhaps this is the reason why the Malaysian government decided that for non-rated accommodation, which are your cheap accommodation, they decided to implement a smaller tax, knowing that if they put up a high tax, the consumer will be the one to bear the cost. And then they were willing to actually put more for 5-star hotels because they think that the bulk of this tax will be borne by the producers, so they're okay with that. Alright, so this is in terms of consumer welfare, and we actually brought in tax incidents into consideration when we were doing this part of the decision-making framework. Alright, and of course next, producers, when you impose a profits, it can increase or decrease the firm's total revenue depending on the PED value. Okay, so if your firm is one that are unable to pass on the higher price to the consumer, you have to shut down. For example, if demand is price elastic, okay, you cannot pass on this higher price down to consumers, because if demand is price elastic, when the prices go up, quantity demanded will fall more than proportionally, leading total revenue to fall. So you wouldn't want to raise prices, so you won't want to pass on the higher price down to consumers. And if you are unable to pass on the higher price to consumers and your costs are too high, you may have actually to shut down if you're making subnormal profits. Okay, but yet we evaluate by saying that 5-star accommodations, they can possibly absorb part of the tax if they actually have sufficient profit margins. The government budget's position, which I think this would be the most significant and important reason why the Malaysian government did this in the first place. Okay, I think that the government actually considered doing this. The most important reason is actually that they want to raise tax revenue to improve their budget position. Right, since the 1MDB saga and all of the nonsense that took place, the Malaysian budget has actually been significantly in a budget deficit for many years with significant debts. So perhaps the government was actually trying to improve its budget position. Okay, and tourism tax is a quick way to improve the government revenue, therefore improving the budget position, and that's the reason why they choose to do this. So we think that among all of the factors that we discussed today, this was the primary factor that we want to pay attention to. Okay, lastly, we have to be mindful that there will be an impact on the economy. Why would there be an impact on the economy? Because when you raise prices of accommodations in Malaysia, it will reduce the demand for tourism, which is an export of a service. So X minus M will fall, AD will fall, real national income will fall, there will be lower economic growth. Firms cut back on hiring workers, there will be higher cyclical unemployment as well. Okay, so in conclusion, all of these factors would have been factors that the Malaysian government would have, of course, decided on before choosing to implement a tourism tax and what is the amount that they want to tax. But yet, among all of the factors that we've discussed just now, it would have likely been the case that the government's budget position would be the most important factor. Okay, but yet, we have to actually evaluate by pointing out that this is what the government intended to do. But there are unintended consequences of what the government intended to do, which is that they want to raise tax revenues, but they may not have considered this, that if your X minus M falls quite significantly, your AD will fall, real national incomes will fall, then they might be able to actually collect less tax revenues from firms in general. And so in the end, they try to improve their budget position, they end up worsening the budget position. That could end up being an unintended consequence as well. Okay, so these are all the factors that the government will have taken into consideration when choosing to implement these taxes. Right, so that would have been the answer to this question. So how many of you actually managed to come up with the points? Okay, so let's continue. We have some time, so we're going to continue with one more question. This is the last question that we're going to hold for today. Okay, so let's try out this last one. Hey, this one is also from Temasek Junior College, which actually doesn't, it still exists. Okay, Temasek, the one that doesn't exist anymore is Tampines. Right, so Temasek Junior College 2018 question. This one is about price controls. Okay, so we are going to actually look at this question. So I'm going to read out the question to you. In the last few years, India has progressively moved to cap. This price cap actually is a maximum price of essential drugs in order to keep cost of drugs affordable for its citizens. Okay, explain the considerations of governments when choosing to impose price controls in different markets. Alright, so shall we try this question? Okay, take 5 minutes to try out this question. Then we will go through. Yes, the slides will be shared with our students on the learning management system. Okay, for students who are joining us for today, you can request from Keith or Jie after class for a learning management system account if you don't already have one. Okay, you can stay back after lesson to request for a trial account from our administrators after class today. You can PM Keith, Keve. Okay, you can direct message him now if you want to as well. This question is price floor or price ceiling, and it requires you to you look at the word governments. It means you must have more than one examples. You do look at the word in plural form here, markets. Again, you need to have more than one example. More than one example, more than one example. So if you ask me for a 10 mark question, a bit insane. It should really have been a 15 mark question. Okay, it's a bit insane. Okay, anyway, I just wanted to clarify with you about our Zoom policies. You got dogs coming in, you got cats coming in, you got family members coming in, you got a half naked father walking around. That was all okay. We are fine. Okay, don't be too worried about it. This is unusual times. Okay, there is no need for decorum. Alright, so we are totally fine with that. You want to bring your noodle soup and eat while we are going through the lesson, it doesn't matter also. Like, there are tons of participants here, nobody is going to really care. So you can go ahead and do what you need to do. You need to munch on snacks, you go and munch on snacks. You need to carry your dog. Okay, the last lesson I had someone carrying the dog the whole lesson. I think that was quite cute, right? That was quite nice. Just let your life be as normal as it can. We understand. Okay, so don't really worry about all this etiquette in online lessons. We are totally fine. Okay, in my first lesson, my kid was like playing Baby Shark downstairs on my Google Home. So he will say, hey Google, play Baby Shark. Wow, jialat. Right, so that was super noisy. So anyway, it's okay, don't worry too much. Well, it's nice that some of you already played around with Zoom and discovered the virtual backgrounds thing. Okay, right, so without further ado, let's go through the answers for this question. In the last few years, India has progressively, let me read the question again. It has progressively moved to cap prices of essential drugs in order to keep costs of drugs affordable for its citizens. Explain the consideration of governments when choosing to impose price controls in different markets. Now, first, I will point out to you that while the question is a good question, I don't think it was rightfully set, because if it was me answering this question, it would have been a 15 mark question minimally and not 10 mark. So if I was the one setting the paper for this question, I would have set this to be at least a 15 marks. It could even potentially be a 25 mark question. It is entirely possible, except for the root word here, explain. Okay, if it was evaluate the considerations or discuss the considerations, it would have easily been possibly a 25 mark question. Okay, right, so when they say considerations and when they say different markets and when they say government, you need to make sure that you have got to have two sets of policies and your examples must be from at least two different governments. Okay, so pay attention to the requirements of the questions here. Now, so let's start first with pointing out that common price controls will be in the form of price floors and price ceilings. And we identify the two markets and the two governments that we want to deal with. Of course, the preamble mentioned drugs in India. That has got to be one of our choices. Then the next one we're going to talk about will be wages in the US. So this is a minimum wage policy basically. So we're going to talk about these two forms of price controls. Okay, let's start first with the price control for maximum price for drugs in India, which is price ceiling. Okay, now so I'm going to leave this here for you for a while, so in case you want to read them, because later I'm going to go and just reference to the diagram, so I will be moving away from this side. You want to take a picture of this slide, you can go ahead and take a picture of this slide so that you can use your phone, hold on to your phone while later I move on to these other slides. Okay, so you can take a picture of this slide and then you can hold on to your phone somewhere, so that later when we are going through the diagram, it kind of makes sense to you, because you can compare what the heck I'm talking about. Alright, so are you all done with the taking of a photo of the slide already? Yeah, everybody okay? Okay, right, let's go ahead. Let's see what this diagram is about. Okay, so our market equilibrium price is given by the intersection point of my demand and supply. So my equilibrium price is going to be P0 and my equilibrium price will be Q0. This is the market for drugs. So I'll label it as figure 1, underline, figure market for drugs. Okay, so market for drugs in India to be exact, and this should be quantity of drugs and this should be price of drugs. If we want to draw a diagram, make sure we label the diagram correctly and accurately. Okay, so the equivalent price of drug is P0 and Q0. If the government feels that, I think that this price is too high, I don't like it, I want to implement a law to bring down the price of these essential drugs. So what the government will do to actually implement a successful and effective price ceiling is to implement a price ceiling that is below the equilibrium price. Okay, so if it implements a price ceiling P max, which we see over here, P maximum, okay, P max over here is your price ceiling. What is going to happen at this price ceiling? You're going to find out that at this price, of course, less drug firms are willing to produce at a lower price. So they will cut back their production of drugs from Q0 to QS. And at this lower price, a lot of consumers are going to find that, well, I'm willing to pay to buy this drug if this price is now lower. So the amount of people who want to buy drugs will go up from Q0 to QD. Okay, so it is stated that QS is larger than QD quantity supplied. So sorry, this is a typo here. So let me just go and quantity supplied is lesser. There's a typo here. Thank you for pointing that out. So this one should be a typo. Quantity supplied is lesser than quantity demanded. Okay, if you want to retake the photo, please feel free and welcome to retake the photo. There is a typo, one word typo. Okay, thanks for pointing that out. Okay, so our quantity demanded is now greater than my quantity supplied. Okay, let's translate that to English. The amount of people who want to buy drugs are more than the amount of people who want to sell drugs, which I'm pretty sure that's what's happening at the supermarkets as we speak right now. Okay, that's not drugs, but groceries. Okay, right, so if your quantity demanded is greater than your quantity supplied, of course, you're going to result in a, what's the word? You can use the chat box to type. What's the word? When your quantity demanded is greater than your quantity supplied, there is going to be a situation called a what? That is happening at the supermarkets now. Right, I'm actually at Coronation Plaza right now. Right, I'm very scared to go downstairs. I think I feel like later if I go and see the NTUC that is going to be a very scary scene. Right, so I don't dare to go downstairs later. Maybe I'm going to be stuck here. Okay, right. So anyway, so there's going to be a shortage because if you set this maximum price, then consumers want to buy more and producers are willing to sell less, and then you're going to have a shortage of QSQD, which is not desirable. Okay. Now, so this part of the answer is not the rational decision making part. Next part of the answer is the rational decision making part. Okay. So what is the rational decision making part? Number one, what must the government consider? Will there be a shortage because of price control? From theoretical economics kind of answer, we will say that let's examine the diagram. Theoretical economics tell us that this is going to happen. There is going to be a shortage. And then now we move on to beyond theory. Let's talk about practical terms. There are a lot of things that it's okay to have a shortage of. Like for example, if you ask me, I think a toilet paper shortage is actually fine. What do you think? You agree with me that a toilet paper shortage is actually fine? We all think a toilet paper shortage is actually fine. I think toilet paper shortage is going to be fine. We'll probably not die. But essential drugs, like for example, drugs for diabetic patients, they can't survive without drugs for diabetic patients like insulin. These are important things. Okay, so we could ask ourselves these questions. If we were the government, is a shortage okay for essential drugs? Okay, the next question is that we also want to look at why is it that we want to also empathize with the government, the Indian government. The Indian government's consideration for implementing this price control is because that they feel that there's too many poor people in India, okay, and there's high income inequality. So a lot of these low income goods, they have zero access to these drugs. So in an attempt to bring these drugs within affordable access to these low income groups of patients, they actually want to implement a maximum price to help these groups of patients. Okay, so that is the reason why if there were already significant underconsumption to begin with, which is that there is high income inequality, therefore the bulk of the population actually don't receive access to the drugs to begin with, then maybe a maximum price is worth considering because it puts the drugs within affordable price range. But there are actually other ways. When we want to take a drastic move, when we want to decide, okay, let's do this crazy thing, we must see, are there other ways? Okay, are there other ways of addressing the problem other than just a maximum price? Like for example, as a government, okay, instead of putting a maximum price, can I subsidize? Can I pay the firms, okay, for these drugs? Then I after that reallocate these drugs on my own to the patients, okay? But for the Indian government, that might not be a possibility because of its budget position. It actually doesn't have that much funds to actually work around with. So that's why they cannot take this as a significant key consideration. So that could be the reason why they choose to implement a maximum price, because a maximum price wouldn't utilize government resources, whereas a subsidy will utilize significant government resources. So that's the reason why they choose to implement a maximum price. Okay? So let's move on. Let's move on to talk about minimum wages in the US. Same thing. You may want to actually take a photo of this slide so that later when I'm going through the diagram, you can compare it with the diagram when I'm going through the diagram. If you want to take a photo, you can do so now. Give you a couple of seconds. Is it possible to implement progressive taxes on buying these drugs? That means you are trying to say charge rich people more. I don't think so. Especially for healthcare products, it's quite unfair to charge rich people more for things relating to health. Okay, right, so I'm gonna go ahead and explain to you about minimum wages. Okay, so US, as you know, has this policy of having minimum wage. Okay, so how does a minimum wage work? A minimum wage is actually a price floor or a minimum price. Okay, so this is your demand for workers, this is your supply for workers or labor, quantity of labor, wage or price of labor. So demand for labor, supply for labor. The equilibrium wage is given by P0. Okay, this is what the market would pay for this number of workers who are willing to work. So the market equilibrium quantity demanded is actually exactly equals to quantity supplied. But the US government feels that this is too crappy as a wage, okay, for a lot of Americans who have a very high cost of living. They feel that, you know, these workers are being exploited and they cannot afford a decent living with this ridiculous amount of money. So the American government decides that, okay, we are going to implement a minimum wage. Now, for a minimum wage or a minimum price to be effective, it has to be set to be above the equilibrium price. Okay, so this is the minimum price. Let's see what happens when you set a minimum wage. When you set a minimum wage, okay, at a higher wage, are there going to be more workers or less workers who are going to be willing to work? You can use the chat box to answer. At a higher wage, are there going to be more workers or less workers who are willing to work? Okay, you're going to have more. So your supply of workers, your quantity supply of workers is going to go up at a higher wage level because I tell you, I pay you more. Of course, you want more people want to come and work. What? So the quantity supply for workers go up. But if you tell companies that, hey, you got to pay more for workers, are they going to be more willing or less willing to hire workers at a higher wage? More or less? Okay, absolutely, it's going to be less. So you see, your quantity demanded for workers, okay, is going to be lower at a higher wage, whereas your quantity supplied of workers is going to be higher at a higher wage. And you're going to see that you're going to have a situation where the number of workers you have willing to work is lesser than the number of workers that the firms are willing to hire. So your quantity supply of workers exceeds the quantity demanded for workers. So what's going to happen here? QDQS, okay, is called what? In micro terms, we find a micro term to this. Yes, it's called a surplus. There is a surplus of workers. In macroeconomic terms, what is a surplus of workers who cannot find jobs? They want to work but they cannot work. In macroeconomic terms, what is it called? So it's gonna be called unemployment. Okay, it will actually cause significant amount of unemployment. Alright, so that is the reason why your minimum wages may not be that a great idea from a theoretical point of view. Now, I will go on to talk about considerations of whether or not the US government should have even implemented a minimum wage. Okay, from a theoretical point of view, from macroeconomic perspective, we will say that if it causes unemployment, we got to see how high the unemployment rate is already is. If the unemployment rate is pretty low, like 4%, 5%, I think it's okay to actually implement minimum wage, okay, because you are close to full employment level. But if you're talking about, say, for example, right now, like during this COVID-19 crisis where unemployment is climbing every single day, that would be a very bad idea because it worsens the unemployment situation in the country. So you have to pay attention to that. Then number two is that you got to bear in mind that workers, okay, they are a factor input in the production of goods and services. When you implement a higher minimum wage, like for example at your supermarkets, at your restaurants, at your convenience stores, then you're gonna expect that these supermarkets, these convenience stores, the restaurants, they're gonna pass on these higher costs back to consumers in terms of higher prices. So there may be some form of cost push inflation. And with this new economy that we have today, okay, before the COVID-19 crisis, we were seeing a huge wave of automation. Now your firms, they're not going to be stupid and they're going to sit there and do nothing and be forced by the government to pay workers a higher wage. This is especially so when, if you think about, to begin with, the group of people who actually receive minimum wage in the US, they are commonly your low-skilled workers. The job functions that they do are repetitive in nature. Because the job functions that they do are repetitive in nature, like for example, cashiers, supermarket workers, restaurant workers, Grab drivers, Uber drivers. Now these functions are actually repetitive in nature and can be somewhat replaced by machines. And so if you think about it, if you implement minimum wage, you may actually expedite the speed that these firms will be willing to carry out research and development or invest in machinery and equipment and technology to actually replace labor with machines. So in the end, when you implement a minimum wage or you try to increase the minimum wage, does it actually help these low-skilled workers or does it worsen their plight? It's actually a big unknown. Okay, right, so this is actually not as simple as it seems. Your rational decision-making framework, there are a lot of factors to take into consideration before you can go ahead and answer a question like this. Okay, so do you all have any questions so far today? Okay, so don't be worried. There will be a Q&A section after class, so don't be worried. With all of our lessons, every single virtual lesson, after the lesson, there will be an opportunity for those who have questions to stay behind. Then we will allow the microphones to be on, and then you can actually proceed to go and ask questions. Okay, for now, right. So if you are a trial student here today to actually try out our lessons, right now what we have is that we have this switch program. What is this switch program? Switch program means that you can actually attend digital lessons now, and then when physical lessons resume, you can actually go and join the physical lessons. Now I'm going to drop some links for you to go and have a look on your own, so I won't be taking a lot of time to do significant heavy marketing. I think you all had a long day, so I don't want to go and hard sell you all anything, so I'll leave you all to go and actually make your own decision about whether or not our classes would be beneficial for you. Okay, so the first link is actually on our switch program. The second link is to actually tell you about how our online tuition classes are like. Bear in mind that we are not like a lot of other tuition centers that have only moved recently to actually move their classes online. We have been having our lessons online in the last 2 years. All 160 plus of our lessons are all fully online. You can watch past recorded lessons. If you are J2, you can watch the whole J1 lessons in this next one whole month. They have got nothing to do. They have mentioned that A-levels are not going to be pushed. They're not going to postpone A-levels. They said that they're not going to postpone A-levels. But actually, I think that your learning is going to be affected in quite some way, given that this is kind of like a 1 month long lockdown. So learning is not going to be the same. So you may want to consider this. I also want to stress this part is that if your families are affected by the COVID-19 crisis, okay, and you cannot afford tuition, but you actually need tuition, please come and talk to me or Keith. Okay, we will do whatever we can to make sure that you have access to good quality tuition. Okay, even if you cannot afford it, so come and talk to us. We will see what we can do. We're going to try to help everyone during this juncture. So if we need to give free, we will give free as well. Okay, right. So do take a look at these 3 links that I have sent you. Okay, and the switch program basically allows you to take digital classes now. Okay, you pay for an online plan, and then when physical classroom lessons resume, we will let you switch to physical classes. For J1s, we are giving, I think, 20% off, 20% off the silver plan. You can check with Keith how to go about doing that, or you can just go to this link. Oh yeah, I forgot to give you this link. So if you want to subscribe to our plans, you can go to this link called tuitiongenius.com. Oops. tuitiongenius.com/subscribe. Okay, right. So if you are J1, you have 20% off the monthly plan for the first month. If you are J2, you get a free upgrade from the silver plan to the gold plan. The gold plan is actually giving you access to all J1 lessons, okay, during this 1 month break. So you can access both J1 lessons, means everything that you missed in J1, you get to actually watch all of the lessons now. Alright, so again, I'm not going to do any more hard selling, so I'll leave you be. There are two things that are going to happen now. Number one, there is someone called Keith within the participant list. His name is Keith. Let me find him out to see if he's still there. Hijkl. Keith. Where is Keith? He's not there. Oh, he's there. Keith Lee. Kevelee. He's the co-host. Okay, please, if you are if you're not our ETG student and you attended the virtual masterclass today, you are supposed to actually you are supposed to private message him your full address, your name and your full address, so that he can send you a copy of our Macroeconomics Express. Of course, if you are our current student, you already have that lah. You don't need to have that lah. Let me just grab something here. So Macro Express looks like that. So if you attended your virtual masterclass today, we're going to send you a copy of this Macroeconomic Express. It looks like that. So just private message Keith Lee your home address and your full name. He will send a copy to you, okay, in the next whole week. If you are a current ETG student, okay, this is our textbook for term 2. Alright, so if you're a current student and you haven't received our term 2 textbook, okay, please drop Keith a message as well to let him know you haven't received it. Maybe it got lost in the mail, so we have to resend you a copy. Also, if you are not our current student and you are joining our classes, our students get basically these notes in a textbook form. Okay, right, so if I will leave you all to actually go and bug Keith with your home address. Now, for now, I'm going to let you all have a Q&A session. So if you have any questions now will be the time. Now will be the time to actually turn your microphones on. You can one by one turn your microphones on and you can raise questions and I'll be happy to answer them now. Okay, anyone has any questions? You can, wait, let me just, I think I didn't give you all an option to unmute yourself. So, more, allow participants to unmute themselves. Okay, right, so you can now choose to unmute yourself. So if you have questions to ask me, you can unmute yourself to ask me questions now. Okay, about any of these questions in the decision making framework. Anyone? Okay, if you don't have any questions and you have texted Keith with your full home address, or you're a current student and you don't have any questions, you can log off already. I'm done for today. Do check out the links that are here and let your friends know about our program as well. Okay, and let them know that they can come and claim for a free trial account. Okay. If you have questions, feel free to stay back. You can turn on your microphones now and ask. anyone has any questions? When evaluating for decision making, do we take into account the real world status of the country? Yes, we have to consider the actual circumstances that the country is facing. Okay, let me find your an article that I have for decision making framework that is real world basis. I think last year we did this. So when I have the time, I will write one about the COVID-19 crisis. But for now, you all can go and read this. This is on personal mobility devices and it's about decision making framework. This was what happened last year. Do we need to say consume up to marginal benefit equal marginal cost? Yes, this is the theory part that you can bring in to support your points. Okay, so yes, you can talk about that. You can turn on your microphone and talk. Don't need to type. You can use the unmute function. Then you can talk to me instead of typing. How many costs and benefits should we aim to cover? How many costs and benefits? No, there is no number to the number of costs and benefits that you should be talking about. It really depends on the number of marks. Like number one, are you answering a case study question? If it's a case study question, it could range from 4 marks, 6 marks, 8 marks, 10 marks, or if you're H1, even possibly 12 marks. If you're a H2 student and you're answering this in an essay question, it could be a 10-mark question, it could be a 15-mark question. But typically, we are looking at covering, if we're talking about just purely how many costs and benefits, most of the time it's going to be at least 2 costs and 2 benefits. So the student is asking, okay, one by one. So you all ask, please don't ask privately. If not, later when I answer the question, then a lot of students feel lost. What is going on? Okay, so anyway, I'm going to read out the question. A student is asking, what are the usual question types or keywords in the question that needs us to use such a framework to answer, given such questions are usually rather broad in scope? Okay, so there are a few like telltale signs that you need to use decision making framework question. When number one, you have absolutely no clue what the question is about and it's question 1, chances are it's a decision making framework question. The second possibility is that they outrightly tell you that using the decision making framework, but most of the time they don't actually tell you that it's using the decision making framework. Like for example, there is one A-level question about the cross-country line. Okay, so, whether or not they should cut through the national reserve, the central catchment area. That was an actual A-level question. So that one, they just simply ask, explain the factors or discuss the considerations that the government take. So you can look at these keywords, explain the consideration, discuss the factors. So this would all be using the decision making framework question. And yes, the questions will usually be very, very broad in scope. And so it will be very, very tough for most students at this juncture to actually answer decision making framework questions. Okay, that's the first question. Let me answer the second question. Do we have this question? This student is asking, do we have to specifically outline that there are implicit, explicit, and opportunity costs for all rational decision making framework question, or like 2 main costs can already? Again, like there is no outright whether or not you need to split it up to implicit, explicit, and opportunity cost for all rational decision making framework question. It depends on the type of questions. And so for the specific one on DEMS, you needed to do that, but it may not be every single question, every single rational decision making framework that question that you need to actually outrightly point out this implicit, explicit, and opportunity cost. Okay, next question, for evaluation, what aspect can we further add apart from taking account into current economic situation? Now, so I would actually suggest you all read this article that I wrote on the personal mobility device. Let me just paste the link again. So you can read this one. I got another one about kangaroos. Just give me a minute. I'm going to find the link for you. I wrote one about my experience with kangaroos, and my life and my family's life and what I did. So the kangaroos one is quite interesting. You should go and actually read it. So writing an evaluation is really not just about real world circumstances. It's actually taking into account all the parameters that we were looking at just now. Let me just, if you don't mind, let me just go back to the PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to share with you the screen again. Let me share with you all the screen one more time. Okay, so if you look at these PowerPoint slides, now like I said, right, it's really quite nuts for us to be teaching this decision making framework as the first topic. We should really have finished the whole bloody curriculum, right? Then after that, then come back to this. Because without first going through all the econs concepts, it's really hard for us to understand how to actually apply all this. So the moment you have actually successfully applied all this, then you take into consideration, actually, if I'm the one making this decision, what are my primary considerations and why did I come to this conclusion? That will be forming part of your evaluation. Okay, so you can think about yourself. If you were in my shoes, okay, what would you do with the kangaroos? You can read the article. If you were in the shoes of the government, what would you do with riders who use the personal mobility devices? What would you have done with them? And if you put yourself in the shoes of the ministerial task force with what they have decided today, would you have decided to 1, close schools today, 2, close schools 2 weeks ago, 3, never close schools? What would your decision have been? Why did you come up with a decision? So you're going to realize that everybody is going to have kind of like a different answer to that. Many people have different opinions, and you are the only one who can justify why you came to that conclusion. So as long as your conclusion is reached through a sound analysis, there is no right or wrong answer. Okay? Okay, let me stop sharing the slide. Let's come back. Anyone else has any other questions? Some of you look like you're gonna fall asleep already. Alright, anyone? If you don't have any questions, feel free to log off. You don't have to feel obliged to stay online. Okay, so I will see you all around. So if you want to try our lessons, you can approach Keith. He can give you a trial account to try our lessons. Okay, if you want to actually join us for classes after today, you can. Right, go to tuitionjs.com/online, tuitionjs.com/subscribe, or tuitionjs.com/switch. Up to you. Okay, right. So I'm staying around. I'm going to continue hanging around until everybody has logged off. So if you have any questions, feel free to continue asking. I know some of you quite shy. Maybe Wei Yang is lurking around waiting to everybody log off and then he asks his question. No? Yes, what's up?
Bye.
Oh, bye. Bye. Should we consider more macro or micro? It depends. Can be fully macro, can be fully micro, and it also could be balanced. It's really up to the question. But most of the time, right, it involves both macro and micro. Like the PMD decision making framework question, right? The personal mobility device one, that one has both macro and micro. The dams one also have macro and micro. The taxes on hotels one also macro and micro. Most of them have a combination of both macro and micro factors. You can link to SOL if you want, but it's not a major point. So it's like if you want to talk about it, you can, but it's not not a major deal breaker. If you didn't mention it, it's okay also. Okay, anyone else has any other questions? Okay, if you don't have any more, if there's no more questions in the next 20 seconds, then I'm going to end the meeting. Anyone? Last call for questions. Okay then, see you guys. Bye bye. I hope you enjoyed the lesson.